Long before London existed as we know it today, its landscape looked very different. Those who called this city home, back before it was even called London, didn't even understand the world in the same way we do now. Their ideas and thoughts were very different. The unexplainable was twisted into belief. When the sun set at the end of the day, the shadows took over, and this once green landscape took on a different feel. Something darker, more sinister, something which could be protected by fire, shouts, and rituals. But back then, these ideas and beliefs, which are now long forgotten, were once then a part of daily life. Keepers of the sacred and upholders of the light were once a regular part of a village group. Storytellers and firekeepers, those whose job was solely to make sure demons were kept at bay by having fires constantly burning. All these beliefs have given way to more modern ideas. As the city grew and life incrementally changed, beliefs too became part of the society of control. But London has always been built on sacred ground. The small groups who first called this place home left behind remnants of how they lived and believed. And today, we'll be delving into just what's been found lurking beneath the surface. Talismans, protections, and even curses have all made their way into a particular part of the Thames, some more mysterious than others. Today, we'll be taking a look at just what that's meant for our understanding of the occult in London. But before we dive into this episode, hi and welcome. My name's Nikki Druce and I'm your host with a silent G. I'm so excited for you to join me on this journey into the occult in London. And if you're new here, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on upcoming episodes. In these first few episodes of this new series, we're going to be going way back to uncover the occult roots of London and also getting to know exactly what spirituality and belief looked like for people who lived in this amazing city before it even had a name. So if you've ever wondered about the belief systems we hold today, how they were formed, and who were the brains behind them, let me guide you into the often gruesome landscape of religion and belief. Now, I just want to caveat that I'm not an expert. I'm joining you on this journey too. And if you want to keep up with more behind-the-scenes explorations and experiments into the occult and magic, make sure you join me on patreon.com/Macabre London for more and to be in with a chance of winning an item to do with the series every single month. So now it's time to grab your warmest cape and stuff your pockets full of runes, because we're off to the banks of the Thames to see what treasure we can find. To kick things off for this first episode, I thought what might be useful is to explain just what the occult is. The word itself, occult, is descended from the Latin word occultus, which means something to the effect of secret or hidden. When people speak of the occult, they're generally referring to beliefs which are outside regular religion, such as Christianity or Judaism, or anything which would be classed as modern-day practices. Occult and esoteric beliefs, esoteric meaning knowledge which is only understood by few, are often all lumped in together. So imagine walking into an esoteric shop. Among the candles and incense, you'd expect to see tarot decks for sale, crystals, star charts, magical equipment for carrying out spells. And the occult tends to take a little bit of belief from everywhere, with the thought being that religion isn't one specific science. And often these beliefs and practices do cross over into science. Alchemy, for example, falls under occult beliefs, as does astrology, the specific mapping of stars and planets in alignment with the sun. The occult system of beliefs is more than a rigid structured doctrine which is offered by standard religions. It provides the practitioner to delineate their own path according to what works best for them. Some have tried to harness certain powers and work exclusively with certain practices. For example, John Dee was big into divination. Later down the line, Aleister Crowley experimented with creating his own doctrines, but overall, the nature of the occult cannot be harnessed, which is what makes it such an exciting topic to explore. It's a separate arm of belief from mainstream religion. It's a mixing pot of intersectionality of strong beliefs, personal ideals, and science, all in the pursuit to learn a little bit more about the world we live in and how it works. Think of it as a never-ending science experiment. There's still things which are being found out all the time. Some people argue that the modern equivalent of the Large Hadron Collider is much like alchemy was to those in medieval times. High-risk, high-reward science experiments which try to discover something more about the world in which we live in. And because I want to make sure we're all learning together here, if you have questions about the occult, do pop them in the comments and hopefully we'll have some knowledgeable souls join us along the way who can answer them. So far, the people that I have spoken to in researching for this series have been so accepting and kind, and it seems that there is a real under-the-wing response to people wanting to branch out into these ways of seeing the world. In fact, if you want to hear about a strange encounter I had with a random bunch of deities I did not expect to find in an unassuming kitchen in South London, please head to my Patreon now to get the full story. But to get back to what the occult is, it's not defined. If it's an unusual belief, it can be called a cult. Now, some people do like to try and lump in bad things into occult beliefs as a way to discredit those practicing and experimenting, such as conspiracy theories, but that doesn't have anything to do with science and magic, so we may find ourselves drifting near to that occasionally during this series. But I'll be sure to let you know if we're going into any weird territories. But you know how we like things here, I like to ground myself in fact. So if there is anything that's coming up like that, be certain that there'll be plenty of warning. But the plan is to link the occult with real life cases from London and tether this whole series in case studies, history and science. But to begin on our journey today and for this first episode, we're heading back to a time even before the word occult was spoken into existence. Now, we have to think back to a time when life was very different from what we know today. We have to go back before Christianity, the main religion which is held in the UK today. In perhaps a more unsurprising turn of events, the majority of UK residents don't actually even practice a religion nowadays. However, the ideals of Christianity is still the way we shape our society, and we're still often governed by religion, which the majority of people don't subscribe to. But before Christianity was even a whisper in London, pagans ruled the land. So the pagans sadly get left out a lot when it comes to history, because record keeping was next to non-existent back then, and often people tend to be fascinated with the Romans, and they did keep records, so that's probably why we have a biased view. But we do know a little bit about who lived here before then. Now, prehistory spans an enormous amount of time. Millions of years, in fact. So we'll be delving into the closest period of time before the Romans arrived. So the area we know today as London was once a green and pleasant land. It was flat, mainly heath-like, and very easy to farm. It had good forests populated with deer, wild boar, wolves and bears. But as a landscape people moved through, It was dangerous and difficult to survive in. We know that hunter-gatherers decided to settle by the Thames due to its abundance of fish and waterfowl. We know they moved to higher ground when the rivers rose, and by the time the Neolithic and Bronze Ages came along, life, albeit a very small population, was established in London. Before the name London even came along, these camps and settlements would have been named individually and protected fiercely from rivals. However, individual groups would have traded with each other when the time was right. But equally, they would keep each other at arm's length. Items have been recovered from the Bronze Age by archaeologists in the thick mud of the Thames, and they point to protections being embedded into the fabric of armour which would have been used to defend settlements. For people who lived by the Thames, they seemingly treated the lifeblood which kept all of the groups alive as incredibly sacred. From the treasures found within the Thames, it seems from the Bronze Age through to the Iron Age, people would give offerings to its waters as a thank you for keeping them alive. Incredibly valuable items have been found stuck into the riverbed. Seemingly some were made with the sole intention of thanking the gods who looked after the river. When you think of the magic of the Thames, it's easy to see how these early people saw her as gifted to them by a higher power. The river played a very important part of daily life. The changing tides, the gift of water and food and waste disposal wouldn't have been taken for granted. In a simpler time, the river gave, and from that, it must be rewarded in return. Items recovered from the river all point to something known as votive deposition, a ritual practice in which gifts are given to water to say thank you to its protective deity. Beautiful hand-forged weapons with no signs of being used for combat were simply gifted to the waters to say thank you for keeping them safe. 2 incredibly well-protected items were recovered in Battersea and Waterloo, both more than likely never worn in battle, but instead made as ritualistic items to just simply place in the river. The Battersea shield and the Waterloo helmet were both taken by the river and embedded in its protective mud for thousands of years before being discovered once more and handed over to the Museum of London. But a few bits of ritualism would have only gone so far. Say you really wanted to impress the river gods, you would have gifted a significant amount to them. And that's where the Havering Hoard comes in. A huge discovery of over 453 bronze items, coins, swords, decorative items and tools. All things which would have been a huge undertaking to make and cost a lot of money. And it's not just London where these things happen. In fact, let's head out of London and head to somewhere that's been around since then. In order to understand the range of Bronze Age beliefs, let's go somewhere that still has something from the Bronze Age there.
So I'm currently at what is known as the Rollright Stones. Promise I'm not being shot at. I think that's just some poachers in the background, or maybe somebody doing it legally, I don't know. However, ignore them. The Rollright Stones are actually 3 monuments. So the King's Men Stone Circle, which is way over there, probably about a 10-minute walk or so away. And then we have the Whispering Knight's Burial Chamber, which are the stones here. And there's also the Lone King Stone as well. But all of these were built roughly around about 3,800 to 1,500 BCE. So these stones here, the Whispering Knights, they're the most important ones because they would have been here first. This is the oldest part. This is a Neolithic tomb. So we are talking prehistory here. But this is a group burial site. This would have more than likely been quite a spiritual place as well. They probably would have had day-long festivals here, but probably even week-long festivals to bury the dead. And then also come back on anniversaries to visit them again and to have more festivals and more celebration of life. So by the Bronze Age, this whole area that you can see here would have been completely sacred. This would have been a worshipped area. And it's still considered sacred ground today as well. People still come here and worship. I would say that it's considered more sacred than Stonehenge. That's depending on who you talk to. And this place just kept on being revisited. It just turned into somewhere really super sacred for the Bronze Age people. Now, the King's Men's Circle, which is all the way over there, we are going to go and have a look at it in a minute. That came later on down the line, probably about 1,000 years later, and that is a marked sacred zone. So the limestone stones that are around outside it are considered the outside world, and once you step into it, it's the new realm. So as you can imagine, this place would have been easily sacred because look at it. It's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. Now, I know if you're listening to the podcast, I will describe it to you because we have in front of us a wonderful vista. You can see in front of you from here, we've got sheep wandering across into the fields. The sun is shining down. It's creating this halo through the haze and the mist that is in front of us as well. Looks like the rain is coming. It's kind of an apocalyptic looking place. So you can imagine that when people came here, they were connected to their gods. That's what they're looking at. And I am looking at the Whispering Knights right now, and they are right beneath the sun. And I can see that this would have been super, super sacred looking. So I get it, I understand it. But now we've met the knights, let's time travel forward about 1,000 years. Let's go to the stone circle, because it's flippin' freezing. So I've now done the trek from all the way over there, and now we're going to step in the land of the sacred. Over the threshold we go. Yep, and we're in. Now, the reason these stones would have been put here, right next to a main road, which is why you can hear the traffic, is this would have been to do with marking the changing of the seasons. People would have gathered here to celebrate their dead, but also to make sure that the seasons were passing in the way that they were expecting. So unlike today, where we can literally just type it into our phones and find out 2 seconds later, this was the old way of knowing what the seasons were up to. This place would have been acting as a giant sundial, but this time we're talking on a grander scale. So this one doesn't just mark 24 hours, this marks the whole year. Now, when the Romans came along, they changed how we dealt with time, and they basically moved the way that Britons and the Celts, Pagans and Druids dealt with their calendar year. So if it feels like in January you are a little bit slow still, that's because it's the middle of winter, and that's what the Britons and the Celts would have been doing. They would have been hibernating at this time, basically conserving their energy and waiting for spring. The Romans didn't do that. And so if you have ever wanted to curse anybody for New Year, New Me and having to go back to the gym, you can curse Julius Caesar. Many people did.
Local folklore says a witch turned a marching king and his knights to stone. At night, the stones move or dance, and you can never count them the same way twice. Stones stand by an ancient ridgeway route along the Cotswolds, part of a prehistoric network of trackways and river routes that link into the Upper Thames Valley. Communities who used rollright were part of the same broad cultural world as people further down the Thames, along the river system that will eventually host London.
Now, this place is entirely ancient, and you can see that this would have been quite incredible back in the day. If you can imagine it, full of people basically celebrating the earth and the land and from where they came from, praying to their gods and goddesses, and generally connecting with the earth. That's the lovely thing about the ancient ways, is that it was all connected. Everything was to do with how you lived your life and how to make it the most prosperous for the seasons, and we've kind of forgotten that a bit in daily life now. But this place is incredible. I've walked around it twice now, so I feel like I probably need to do a third lap, and then we're gonna get on out of here.
Now, out on my adventures recently, I've been head to toe in the sponsor of our series, Snag. I'm so excited to tell you about them because this is a brand I truly love. You know, I don't bring you any sponsors unless I genuinely like them, and Snag is a shining example of that in action because I wear their clothes on a daily basis. Snag is a truly incredible clothing brand who creates clothes for every body. With sizes which range from a UK 4 to 38, they really have everyone covered. Now, I started off buying from Snag during the pandemic when I was looking for comfy tights that stayed put, didn't roll down or sag, and which actually lasted. And I was not disappointed with what I got. I was so fed up with buying tights, putting my nail through them on the first wear, and having to throw them away. But these tights are incredible and they really do last. Now, I still own pairs of tights from that time in 2020. They're still looking as good as new, and I wear them about once a week in the winter. But you know me, I always have long pointy nails, and Snag tights just brush that off. It's nothing to them. They're like, you're going to have to try harder if you really want to break me. And honestly, I appreciate that bossy behaviour from a pair of tights. Snag is so much more than a tights company. I've been out and about in this incredible Borg bomber jacket, and I've been living in it. It's so comfy. My husband is super jealous of it as he wants one, and it's got the perfect size sleeve if you've got decent sized arms like mine, and it also allows you to layer up if you need to. And the pockets are an actual size that you can put your phone and keys in without the fear of them falling out. It's great for exploring Bronze Age standing stones in the cold, wind and rain, and it keeps me looking stylish too. Snag make way more than tights, so make sure you head to their website. They ship to a lot of countries too, so it's worth taking a look if you're not in the UK. Honestly, I could go on about them for ages, but I'm not gonna because I want you to see for yourself. So make sure you head to snagtights.com and have a look. I think you're gonna love it. Now, I've partnered with Snag for the entirety of this year-long series, so make sure you keep listening as there will be hints and clues for you to collect along the way to enter a giveaway coming up soon. So, now back in London, we have an idea of just how the landscape may have looked back in the time of the Bronze Age. Simplistic, but imbued with meaning. However, the method of burial may well have been different in London itself. The sheer amount of skulls found within its waters suggests that depositions of loved ones' skulls was an incredibly important ritual. Now, here's where things take a turn for the gruesome. The sheer amount of just skulls deposited into the river suggests that something else may have been at play. Human sacrifice. It's not known for certain if the people of the Bronze and Iron Age carried out human sacrifices as part of their regular beliefs, but the ways in which other bones have been found around the country would suggest something horrific was afoot. In the Mendip Hills, a shocking discovery was found relating to a Bronze Age burial, if you could even call it that. 37 individual bodies were found within one small burial site, but these bones told a very unpleasant story. When archaeologists discovered the unusual collection of remains, they began to analyse every fragment they uncovered. First off, the recovery of the bones was not easy. They'd been dropped into a shaft after death, something which was seemingly purposeful to compound the disrespect placed on these people's bodies. When the bones were analysed, they began to reveal just what had happened to these people. Among the mix of 37 men, women and children, the bones showed marks of extreme violence, crushing and indentations which were indicative of dismemberment. These 37 people were killed in horrific ways, and then their bodies were cut apart and thrown down a hole. Some even showed signs of being cannibalised. The violent nature of these deaths cannot be confirmed, but archaeologists think these were either rivals who were executed then eaten, or alternatively, these remains were those of people from one large group, their bodies having been used as human sacrifice. Either way, we know that whatever happened to them was absolutely abhorrent. And some of the skulls found thrown into the Thames show the same fate. Souls who were murdered, dismembered, and then splashed to the four winds, finding their composite parts drifting out into the estuary to live forever or until the tide decided to reveal them. Knowing that these ancient populations potentially used human sacrifice as part of their worship, we can begin to paint a picture from other ancient sites discovered within the city, which may further prove this point. We know that the sun was worshipped as well as water in the Bronze Age, and perhaps certain temple sites correlated with such fantastical precision that they created the perfect altar to carry out a human sacrifice to dispose of the body in the Thames. You can imagine this feeling incredibly powerful for their beliefs and a perfect way to honour their gods. In areas like Carshalton and Putney in South London, pits have been found containing placed deposits of animal carcasses, notably sheep and dogs, and carefully selected metal or ceramic objects, interpreted as religious offerings to the earth. This offers another idea that sacrifices were part of the beliefs of prehistoric people, and maybe the human sacrifices were reserved for special occasions. Even older timber structures have been found by HS2 excavations, the high-speed rail network, which look to be some sort of ritualistic placement for a place of worship. In the time before the Romans arrived, it's believed that the area of what would become London was full of Celtic pagans, or Druids, as they became known to the Romans. These were people who believed that everything to do with living was sacred. Earth was worshipped to grow the best crops. Water was thanked for providing liquid life. The sun was praised for providing warmth and abundance. The stars thanked for guiding their daily moves. Powerful gods who hung above their heads. Animals, plants, and the land they lived on were treated with the utmost respect, knowing that if it wasn't, it could deliver blight and a barren harvest. The daily involvement in the simplicity of staying alive bonded people with the elements which ruled their daily lives. It's no wonder that trying to have at least a modicum of influence over the outcome became something that was prayed for every day. The most basic of changes would have easily seemed like a miracle to those who toiled and struggled. It would be easy for people to believe that placating the gods resulted in good harvests, without the scientific proof that we would later develop. These beliefs were their science, a tangible outcome. It didn't work every time, but it did some of the time. And you can see how these early beliefs began to form into generational hand-me-downs through families. These long-held beliefs were keeping life going in this area of the world, but when invaders arrived, those who lived in the as-yet unnamed landscape of London would have to choose whether to fight or surrender, and for some, they'd have no choice at all. When the Romans arrived in Kent in 43 AD, they chopped, slashed, and methodically annihilated thousands of Britons. The Romans were on orders from their emperor, Claudius, to invade and conquer southern Britain. Claudius wanted to take the prosperous grains, which all those rituals and worshipping had grown, and he also wanted to steal the metal from the sporadic settlements. The battles which erupted were ruthless, and the Romans, even though they were outnumbered, were far more tactical in their approach. It took 45 years for the Romans to sweep their way across the country, but they did in tight formations, ambushing and overpowering group after group as they went. But within this slow and never-ending cycle of encroachment and stealing, people began to band together. Groups that lived near each other, that had more than likely been at war or eyed up as potential food, were now joining forces to fight this slow creeping death. And they had more than the Romans did. They knew these lands like the back of their hands. They fell asleep to the sounds of the Thames lapping at the shore. They awoke to the sound of the blackbirds singing in the trees. They hunted, foraged, and grew these lands. They had put so much into their faith and shaping these places that they weren't going to back down anytime soon. When several forces joined together, they would unite their love for their land and their gods that forged them. And if they were going to give them up, they weren't going to go out without a fight. For one woman in particular, she'd lead an army empowered by the goddess herself. Next time, on episode 2 of Belief in the Occult in the Capital City, we'll be delving into how Boudica took on the Romans and won. Did she do it alone, or did she have a powerful goddess on her side? Join me next time to find out. taking the time to spend with me for this first episode of this series. I really hope you've got a feel for where we're going with this, and the more we explore, the more you'll begin to see that the world is indeed a very small place, and many of the ideas we hold in the current day go all the way back to a time that our brains can't even comprehend. If you're already super excited for episode 2, why not pop over to Patreon to help me make this series, get lots of extra content and magical experiments, and also to be in with the chance of winning something from the series every single month. Just head to www.patreon.com/Macabre London. The link is in the show notes and also on the end screen of the video on YouTube. A huge big thank you to Snag for sponsoring this series. They really are a wonderful company and they cater for everyone and everybody, and they're really good eggs too. If you're thinking about where to spend your money in a time where it seems like all big businesses are out to make life bad for someone along the line, you can be safe in the knowledge that Snag just isn't that way. Head to their website, have a browse, and I promise you'll like what you see. Thanks for joining me for another macabre and magical tale from the city's past. I've been Nikki Druce. Remember to stay spooky, and I'll see you ghouls next time.